So just to let everyone know, we will be recording this so that we can use this for future educational materials. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll get started with the presentation in another 2 or 3 minutes as a few more people file in. Okay, how are we doing, Graham? Are you about ready for us to get started?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We are we have on the call today Graham Ford, who is our Director of Technology and Consulting Services. He's been with us for 9 years and heads many different tech programs and support options at 501 Commons. And my name is Carrie Morrison. I am our Engagement Manager for Technology Services. And we have a couple more people coming in. So a little bit about 501 Commons. We all rise when nonprofits thrive. 501 Commons serves nonprofits as experts, innovators, and partners. Our passion is to amplify the strengths of nonprofits so people and communities flourish. 501 Commons provides expertise to nonprofits through over 30 services, including a full range of management and consulting, technology consulting, IT planning, database development, outsourced HR, accounting, and free information and referral services if we don't have options that would be the best fit for you. As a nonprofit ourselves, we're grateful for the support we receive from dozens of philanthropic partners to help us keep services affordable to nonprofits of all sizes. Annually, our services strengthen more than 2,000 organizations, improving the quality of life for individuals, families, and communities. We're guided by the values of respect, integrity, transparency, inclusion, accessibility, partnership, and results. And we are a 501c3 ourselves and excited to be able to share technology with other organizations to help them achieve their missions even better. So we will get started. This is Talks Tech. Thank you for joining again. We do a couple of these a year, and we've had a lot of interest in the platform Teams for Nonprofits. As many of you know, this is a part of the Microsoft 365 suite. We find that many organizations are utilizing this. Some are using different platforms, and we'll go over some of the pros and cons of these. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to our presenter, Mr. Graham Ford.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. And Carrie, if you could mute so that we make sure that there's a little bit of feedback I hear. So thank you, everyone. I'm going to be talking about Microsoft Teams today. I'm going to talk about this from perspective of organizations that may be using Teams already and you want to use it better, and for organizations that might be thinking about using Teams. Maybe they want to they're considering moving to the Microsoft platform and want to see about how the functionality works. So we're going to go over about Teams. I'm going to talk specifically about functionality. There's going to be a Q&A opportunity, demo, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about more information and other pieces. Actually, I think I moved this design slide up farther. So we'll get to that. So Microsoft Teams is a unified interface to Office 365 in most respects. It doesn't do everything that Office 365, but it brings together many of the different components and is tightly integrated with Office 365. It's integrated with, it can integrate with other non-Microsoft online services. So if you use other platforms for project management, or like Asana or Trello, or many other services, you can integrate Teams with those services so that content shows up in your teams. You can sort of bring everything together in one place. That's really the power of Teams. I think a lot. It's also a collaborative tool for internal and external users. So the message here is that a lot of people think of Teams as like, it came about sort of as a competitor, maybe to Slack or Zoom or other types of conferencing and online chat tools. But it is more than that. It is really like a container in which collaboration and information and other products and services can be brought together in one easily accessible place. That is sort of something that I think few other products offer quite as well. Certainly other products have a lot of that, but this is, that's the approach that Teams takes. So, the basic features of Teams are pretty, common. Chat, presence, meaning, who's online or offline or out of office, things like that. Screen sharing, video, one-on-one ad hoc and groups and meetings. File access, so that's, it acts as the ability to access and share files. It does task management, so like to-do lists and other types of tasks are part of the functionality. It can share and display web content and applications. So if you have websites or other pages you want to present through Teams, you can do that. It also can be your phone system. It actually, if you want to, like with pandemic, a lot of organizations may or may not have addressed some of these problems, but like, where do I do with my phones? And we all know that we're all in the long haul here for remote work, and things have changed a lot. And Teams can be your phone system, so that and it's really nice because when you turn it on, it just sort of works. All of a sudden Teams has a dial pad and can dial phone numbers, and it rings and does some other great things. So that can be really useful and a good way to tie that in. So the clients for Teams, so the applications you use to access Teams, run on Windows, Mac, iPhone, Android, and the web browser. You can pretty much do everything you need to do with Teams, even just through a web browser. And so that works, it looks a little different sometimes. And in particular, web browser meaning Chrome and the new Microsoft Edge. There's a lot more limitations in browsers like Safari and I think Firefox. So I would say Chrome and Edge are the premier sort of client web browser clients, specifically around video. Yeah. And there's a question there. Teams really is a replacement for Skype. In fact, Skype for Business is no longer, I believe they've let it go. And so Skype, Teams has replaced Skype for Business. It can sort of replace, I think, Skype Consumer. It's just different in how that functions. Skype Consumer is an entirely different beast. Teams, now I'm not talking today about Teams for consumers and Teams for sort of personal use. There is the ability to use Teams as like a, personal users. I have during the pandemic, I set up a team for my daughter to use with her friends and things like that. I'm talking about Teams as a front end for Microsoft 365. So it's a organizational tool in which, the organization owns the data, accounts, and all the systems that compose Teams. So that's just one clear distinction I want to make about what I'm talking about today. So Windows, Mac, iPhone, Android, web browser, you can access it wherever and whenever you want. And this is good. I think they function effectively across these platforms. Occasionally there might be a feature that comes first for one application and then a little bit later for the other, but Microsoft has been doing a good job of keeping sort of some, parity in the functionality across the different clients. Now the architecture of Teams, and this is an important thing to understand, is that Teams is part and parcel with Office 365. And in fact, when you create a team, it is pairing with, every time you create a team, which is a grouping of people in 365, it's actually creating also an Office 365 group or unified group as they're called. And that means that there's a mailbox, there's a SharePoint site, there can be Planner and Power BI and other items shared. The resources that an Office 365 group has are accessible within the team. And you'll actually see in your Office 365 admin console, and I can show you this later, that they're sort of one and the same in terms of they're tied together. If you add someone to the team, they get added to the group. And if you add someone to the group, they get added to the team. And the 365 group provides the logical sort of organization where the data and information is stored related to this. If you have security policies or compliance policies that apply to the team, they apply, or to the group, they apply to the team and the data that's created. Any questions so far? I know I'm going pretty quickly. And some of this may be sort of like, you know, too much or not new, but I want to make sure that I'm covering sort of for a broad set of like audiences here.
And if you do have questions, feel free to field them to me, Carrie, or you can raise your hand and we'll call on you as soon as possible. And one thing that we did want to touch on is why aren't we presenting on Teams? Teams does have this function, but we wanted to be able to hop into the actual application on Graham's computer and walk you through some things. So that's why we're using a different program today. But feel free to send any questions to Carrie, raise your hand.
Yep. Okay, so the Teams interface, I'm just gonna spin through this a little quick for the sort of folks that are newer to it. This is what it looks like. You're seeing the chat screen here, you know, where you would individually chat with, say, one or more people. So that's can be done in an ad hoc manner through the chat interface. There's the Office 365 waffle. In fact, I took this as a picture of the web. You're actually seeing a picture of the web version of Teams. And that's why there's a little waffle up here. That's the 9 dots, it's called the waffle. You have the Teams section. So this is where group chat is and group resources are. There's a calendar function. It's not like your Exchange or Outlook calendars. It's a little different in that it really just holds, it's designed to hold your Teams meetings. I do wish the calendar functionality was a little bit better and allowed for more generalized calendars. And we can talk a little bit about that later. Calls. So this is tracking your calls and meetings, whether you have Teams phone system or not. You do see the calls thing and you can access files. And then as usual with Microsoft platforms, there's the ellipsis or the triple dot that lets you access to other things and other stuff. In fact, because this is the web application, you also see a little download icon here where I might click to download the desktop version of Teams. One thing to note about when you're installing, especially on Windows, Teams installs as in the user's directory. It does not install at the computer level. So it does mean that if your users don't need to be administrators in their computers to install Teams. If you are trying to roll out Teams and things, there's a whole separate way to do that if you want to make sure to install across all the computers. So more about, and then under the Teams interface, the triple dot, you can see all the other things available. So like you see tasks and shifts and OneNote and Stream and other things that I might have or apps that are installed on Teams. The wiki. I don't use the wiki a whole lot. I think it's better just to stick to OneNote notebooks. They do mostly the same thing, and OneNote is a little bit more flexible in a number of ways. Just a comment there. Let's see. Now within the Teams interface, this is the Teams tab. You see over here, which is the actual team itself. And the Teams team, like the naming drives everyone nuts. The application is called Microsoft Teams, and within that there are different teams. And so right here, the DO, Department of Mysteries, that's a team, okay? And it has a set of members, and then maybe a couple of people are owners. Owners are the people that can add and remove people from it. Then there are channels. Channels are just a way to organize conversations and information across the system, across the team. There are conversations and tabs that show up here, and you can, as you add different applications and content, the little plus sign is useful for adding them to it. So if you wanted to pin a OneNote notebook up here, you would use the plus sign. If you want to pin a spreadsheet, you use the plus sign. And it'll pop up a little window that lets you add things. So right here, we're seeing the Files tab of Teams. And the Files tab is actually just a window into a SharePoint site, into the SharePoint site behind your team. It's a good way, you know, it's sort of an easy to use interface that allows people to access SharePoint files without having to go into SharePoint. Up here, you see that this team is a private team. I generally always create teams as private teams. I don't create public teams, you know, pretty much ever. I don't think I've ever purposely created a public team within my system. The reason being is that you never quite know who you want to join into the system. So a private team allows you to always selectively add people to the team. For instance, you might have volunteers that you give an account to temporarily for some work, or board members or things like that, and you don't necessarily want them to get access to like the general staff area. And so just make it a private team, and when you onboard someone, for example, add them, make that part of your onboarding process now. I wish you could disable public teams, honestly, as an administrator. And down here, you can join or create teams. And everybody can join or create teams. I highly recommend that if any organization that there are ways to limit and restrict the ability to create teams, but it's a technical process that requires, you know, IT administrators to do it. You need, as you roll out teams, have a shared understanding with everyone else that they're not just going to go create teams. If you do have teams that get created for various reasons, document the process and when and why that is handled. The meeting interface, this is the meeting interface. We'll jump into that a little bit later, but you can see here, I started a meeting and you see like this is the participants in the chat. You have reactions and emojis. These little boxes are breakout rooms. You can set up breakout rooms. There's a drop down that allows you to do things like device settings, to pick which microphone and camera you're using. Meeting notes, so you can actually pop out like a shared OneNote or notebook for everyone to have shared note taking on that meeting. There's some different views like gallery, large gallery, and together mode. Together mode is sort of like puts people in an auditorium setting, which can be useful if you have a lot of people that want to, and you want to sort of have a little more denser view than say gallery provides. Let's see, what else? Oh, oops. There's Call Me. You can do background effects, live captions, so that it actually, as people talk, it's actually captioning what they say. I don't know that the captions are good enough to deal with like, say, persons that need to sign and are, or need to be able, they can't hear or have difficulty hearing potentially, but it, you know, can be helpful. And those captions are recorded in the, you know, in the recordings of the meeting that you might create. Start recording. Recordings are always stored in your OneDrive. So that's, you know, really useful, or in the team where the meeting is started. It's a little bit like whereas Zoom gives you an option to record on your computer or record in the cloud. Teams always records in the cloud into your OneDrive. So you can see there's a dial pad if you have dialing, and you can actually turn off incoming video. So if you have folks with bandwidth issues, they can turn off incoming video to improve their cloud quality. See, on a sharing screen, there's a few things like sharing, you know, this is all pretty self-explanatory. It's gotten better. One thing to note is Teams is an evolving product. Microsoft is making changes all the time. If you care, you should watch their tech community blog to see what's coming, and especially if you're an IT person, I recommend paying attention to the tech community blog. You can see they've got some new different views and presenter modes. So you can have things sort of show up over your shoulder, like you're sort of a reporter mode in different ways. That can be useful for a presentation when you want someone to be able to see content and see you at the same time. There is some interesting challenges, I would say. One of the weaknesses of Teams in meetings compared to Zoom is some issues related to folks that are having late translators and need signing. Teams just doesn't work as well because you cannot pop out the video into a separate window as well. There's some things, we have some clients that have hearing impaired persons who, and then have translators, and they end up using Zoom for something because Teams does have a challenge in that perspective. You can select windows or screens to share. There's a whiteboard functionality that's getting some upgrades lately and like does, actually looks pretty cool. And a PowerPoint Live, that lets you sort of have a more integrated presentation of the PowerPoint than just sharing the screen so that people can see the content, mark it up, you know, talk about stuff as we go. Let's see. A couple of things about Teams team design, forgive it. There's sort of, you think about how you structure your teams as two different types. You've got evergreen teams and you might have initiative-based teams. So think about these evergreen teams as like, you know, the development team has a team that's just ongoing. People come and go from it, and as they join, onboard, and offboard from the organization, they get added to that team. Or you might have a board team or other things. You may or may not store files in this team. I tend to recommend that organizations don't store files in the team's group, in the group associated with the team, and that you store files in different SharePoint sites if you're going with SharePoint. The reason being is that you often want different audiences for the files versus the team's chat. So think about, you have a development team that has files and you want the executive director, maybe it's a larger organization, or other leadership teams members to have access to the files for the development team. But you want to have, but you don't want to expose those other leadership team members to all the chat and things that the development team might be talking about within their channels. So for that reason, you probably want to keep those files separate from the team within the system, and basically just set a policy or process that we don't store files within the team, within teams, within that SharePoint site. And I'll show you a little bit more in the demo to clarify this. But you know, that's just something to think about, because you know, with Teams, it's like, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Because you can store files right there doesn't mean you should store files right there, because others, you might want other people to have access to it. Whereas you'll have initiative-based teams. These are things that might have a start and end. You maybe want to store the files and data together there because you want it all in one place, and then maybe you archive it off later when it's done. This is good because they facilitate sort of cross-functional collaboration and project guests. It's just and you know, there's nothing sort of innovative about this, but it's just a way to think about how you structure your different teams. So the evergreen teams might be something that only your IT administrators create, or whoever runs your sort of systems create those and add people to them. Whereas initiative-based teams might be created and by program managers as they maybe start different projects and initiatives. And you have a shared understanding about, you know, when to create these and when to end them, so that you can archive them and get rid of them. And I'll get to the question about guests in a little bit. Tracking tasks and information. So one of the things to think about is that Teams brings together a number of different Office 365 functionality. And a lot of this might be project management and collaboration. Now, Planner and lists are good examples of applications that are in there and integrated that you might use with this application with Teams. They're actually entirely separate applications, and you can use them independent of Teams. But I talk about them because they're sort of readily available within Teams, and they can be a really good use case, like for how you want to transform Teams from not being just like a chat and conferencing application to actually this environment in which you do work and you store things. Planner is a simple Kanban view, familiar, that would be familiar to Trello users. It integrates with the To-Do app, the Microsoft sort of individual, like get things done task management application. And the nice thing is because Planner the Planner tasks are similar and across all plans, they're the same thing. Users can get a unified view of all of the tasks that they're assigned to. So that Planner and tasks and Teams can actually be that interface for it, for that unified view, provides a sort of broader get things done thing. Now there's also an application called Lists, and it can be a question of like, do I use Planner? Do I use Lists? Do I just use a spreadsheet to track some information? Lists is good when you have more structured data and to track and you want to enumerate those items or enumerate items. And it's sort of like a database light. So unlike a spreadsheet where a spreadsheet can have bad data or sort of like be whatever in it, List has actually defined data types, like this column is a date and this column is a number, things like that. Or you could have a document attached, and, in a list might have a document attached to a row, or a person's account assigned to it. So lists can do a lot of this, provides a sort of table of information and data that could serve some of the functions of Planner, but it is more structured. So for example, you want a list of tasks, but you need to do things like have not just a due date, but maybe a department column or a column for, different date values related to the item. Lists can give you a structured view of the data that Planner really can't do. That is really useful if you start getting into fancy stuff like Power Automate, like maybe you have forms that are used to generate like lists so people can submit information to the list. But this all can be done, you can create these within Teams in the application and access that data within Microsoft Teams. Let's see, moving on. So I'm gonna step back and do some Q&A. There's a question about, I'd be interested to invite board members with outside emails to join a team. What function can they have, or how does that work best? So you can easily add guests. Guests can be members of a team, and I'm gonna jump forward to this slide. So an administrator must enable guests to join teams within the Teams administrator admin portal. When they do that, it's going to take a day before the functionality even works. Okay, just to be clear, they turn on, you're going to wait. It can be a very effective method for external collaboration. In fact, you might have SharePoint groups or sites that you've invited guests to. It's very similar, but in my experience, it actually has a better experience for external users than inviting external users to SharePoint. And that's because Microsoft did a sort of better system for managing. They just, it's sort of 2.0 of guest invitations. So if you've had a bad experience with guests in SharePoint, it's definitely, I think, better inviting guests to Teams. The experience for the guest and the experience for administrator. I will show you actually how to invite a guest to this. Guests have more limited access. They can't create resources, like they can't create tabs within the team, so they can't change things and they can't schedule meetings. But they can do most of the things that you want them to do, like edit and access information in Planner or lists or files and other things within the team. I'm going to jump out. I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to jump out into the demo.
A couple questions that came in that might be good to go before we hop into that. And I know some of the things are definitely going to be answered by actually being in the program. But one was relating to, this is from Tyler, I believe. This one was relating to planner and lists. They're wanting to maintain an agency grant calendar. Does that sound like something that would be applicable for planner or list? They're trying to decide between that and Excel.
Yeah, so you could definitely use, I would suggest this is a better place for something like that. The reason being is that you would want to have like structured information with dates. And there are ways to like get a calendar view of a list. So if you have dates of like, say when, if you have a column in your list that is like application date for that example, you could then create a calendar view of the plan of the list that shows it in a classic calendar perspective. So I think for what you're describing, a list is probably the most appropriate thing. And if you have someone that's tech savvy, you can then do things like use Power Automate or use forms so that people can submit things. You might say create some notifications when things are due. You can do a variety of fancy things with lists that are harder to do in some respects with Excel or Planner.
Thank you. And then just one more question that may be answered in the demo. Some people are wondering how editing files in Teams really integrates across the Microsoft 365 platform. How does it touch on files that are in your OneDrive, that are in your SharePoint, and anywhere else in your cloud files? So
yeah, I will talk about that demo in just a moment.
Okay, fantastic.
Okay, so I'm gonna share, if I get the right thing here. Okay, so you're looking at this is a Teams. This is not our normal tenant. We have a test 365 system. And as I said, there's the chat, there's the Teams, and there's other areas. Now, there's a couple of things that you should know. Like if I write, let's see, who could I? Actually, if I chatted with a user and I attach a file, it actually wants to use it. It only shares files with OneDrive. So one of the things, one of the answers there is every time you're dealing with a file in Teams, it's actually a SharePoint or OneDrive. Even files you share are stored in OneDrive. And as I said, like when you go here into the Files tab, this file is actually a SharePoint document. You actually can go here to the ellipsis and say open in SharePoint and go see that file. So this is answering the question that was just asked. That is a SharePoint file. If I have other documents, if I go add a tab here, I could add a SharePoint site or page or even another SharePoint document library as a tab to this team. And so everything in terms of file storage and everything here is SharePoint and all the in there. So here's the post section. This is just the general group chat. And unlike Slack, it's actually threaded, meaning you can reply to specific conversations and threads in it.
Graham, one more clarification around the across the platform sharing. So if there's a file on my computer and I set it into a Teams or into a chat, does that automatically set it somewhere in OneDrive or SharePoint?
It adds it to the files out there. So if I were to, let's see. I'm trying to think about a file that I could add. Where's my other file? I think, oh, there we go. I'm going to attach a file, and it's going to upload from my computer. So there's no like attach a file. There's actually upload, and it's going to put that in the file. It's when you upload it, and that'll become a SharePoint file. I used to think of Teams as actually a Trojan horse for getting people to use SharePoint and things. So that's, you know, and it still kind of is. So basically, I've got a team here, and there's different things I can manage the team. So I could invite members, including guests. Now, one thing you might want, here's a tip. When you're adding a guest to the team, you might say someone, I might do someone at some, okay. And it's gonna say, add that person as a guest. Now, right there is someone is their name and how they're gonna show up. You might not want that. Maybe you know that someone at someone.com is really, you know, Tom. You know, Tom Jones is their name. So it's important that when you're adding guests, click the little pencil and rename them, because especially like if you're inviting say a board member with a personal account, they could have, you know, TJ59 at Comcast.net, and no one else on the board is going to know who TJ59 is. You want to, you know, rename them to be Tom Jones. It is easy. You can fix that if a mistake is made and you don't catch it later on, but you have to use the Azure Active Directory admin center to change that. And that's, I'm not going to get into how to do that. It's more important to do it correctly the first time. That's the better way to do it. But an IT administrator can go in and fix it. So that's how you would add a guest. And I am not going to add that because I don't know. You can see pending requests. You can change settings for the channel, like what guests can and can't do. Actually create enough, maybe you can let them now create channels. That might have changed. And there's different apps and other applications to it. The channels over here, you can create notifications. So you could say turn off notifications or alert on activity, manage the channels, or connect information to it. That can be really useful. I have a file here, for example, like a guest list. I actually created that as an Excel spreadsheet, and then I pinned it here. And I will then be able to see and edit in this tab view that Excel spreadsheet. Okay, so you can see how this SharePoint document is embedded and work right into Teams. And frankly, if like a board member comes in here, they're not going to even know that this is SharePoint. Most folks, they'll just see the file. So that's, you know, it's a pretty good interface. Here's a party plan. So this is a this is Planner, and so you can see that. Oh, that didn't help. Yeah, there we go. So you can see this is a planner view of with a Kanban. I can have different buckets of things and have tasks and assignments. So if I have, you know, buy balloons as a task, and I can get a view, and I can do things like assign that to a person, add a label. I'm going to assign it to me. I'm going to say it's in progress. Maybe there's a due date, you know, a little late to get balloons. Now, and you can even attach files. And again, it's going to attach either a link or a URL or a Teams file. And if you upload from your computer, again, that'll be loaded into SharePoint. Everything gets stored in SharePoint in this purpose so that people who have access to the team have access to the file. If you were to, you know, that sort of, again, Teams and SharePoint are all closely tied together in terms of functionality.
I may ask one question and kind of answer and then have you elaborate a bit. So we had someone ask, how are SharePoint and OneDrive similar or different? They use a different type of cloud storage. So how I see these is SharePoint is something that, well, all of these are tied together. All of your files can be shared within these platforms. And if you make an edit in one place, it does that across all of the platforms. It's all the same files. SharePoint is usually created to be a sort of intranet where you can set files how you want. Often you'd have your internal website. If you had an HR SharePoint, maybe you have all of your documents necessary for that, and you could set them in a nice, easy way to access them that looks a little bit like a website. OneDrive works more like the C drive or the S drive on your computer. So it's organized in an index like you would on a normal hard drive. And then Teams is a way to access, invite people to, and integrate with those files in a more talkative fashion. But Graham, would you like to elaborate a little bit more how SharePoint, OneDrive, and Teams are all connected?
Yeah, well, this is a problem where OneDrive is a name that Microsoft used for multiple things. OneDrive is the app that runs on your computer that syncs your files so you can access them. The OneDrive app can be used to access your OneDrive and SharePoint files. OneDrive as a system is your personal SharePoint storage. It's where your personal files are, and SharePoint is a shared set of files. So every user automatically has a OneDrive in Office 365 where they can store their individual files. And when you chat, you remember how I said every time you share a file in Teams, it gets added to your, it uploads to SharePoint? That's the same in the chat. If you upload and attach a file here, that file is going to be stored in your personal OneDrive and then shared to the other user to see. Whereas if you attach, it's sort of wherever you are, whatever context you are in, is where Teams puts the file. And within the chat, the context is your personal stuff. Within Teams, the context is the team. And so that's where the file gets stored. So there's a question, so how does a guest account that's added to a team, how do they access it on their own computer or phone? So they're gonna have, they don't have to have Microsoft 365. They can use a Microsoft account, so a personal Microsoft account, to log into it. If they do have Microsoft 365, they will be able to access it with their teams. So for example, let me see, I can't really show this because I'm not really invited for this, but if I was invited to a team, I would see to another organization. Right up here where I'm circling next to my little initials would be an organization name. And I could actually switch from my systems teams to say the team that I am invited to, and I could go into their other system and access it. So they'll be able to use the desktop application or the web or however to access it. And they can have a Microsoft 365 account or a regular Microsoft account to access it. Let's see, what else? Oh yeah, I was gonna go into the tasks. I want to show you one thing is, I can now go into tasks in here. So Teams is this unified interface to all of your tasks. And you'll see that within this, I saw that the buy balloons task is assigned to me in my list. Yes, so Donnie, to clarify, team chat files are stored in your OneDrive, Teams files in the SharePoint site. Because everything gets uploaded in the 365 when a file is shared, and a chat file goes there. And I want to just, this seems like minute details, but I think it's really important for people to understand where data is going in their system and how. And why. Let's see, I'm gonna start, let's see. Oh yeah, calendar. Yeah, it tends to be somewhat like people get used to it and it doesn't confuse people that much, I would say. But I think it's important, especially if you're an administrator, to know what's happening on your system. Now, in this calendar, you see the calendar here, and I can set up a Teams meeting. And there's even webinar functionality within this. I can meet now, and if I just want to start a meeting, and I'm gonna, it's starting, opened up a new window for me. Let's see. So here's a meeting that I'm starting, and I'm going to leave my video and audio off don't use audio because I don't want to conflict with our meeting that we're having. And so this is like stopping a meeting. I can then add participants and invite them or copy a meeting link. And I could invite. Now, one thing you can always do is invite external users to a meeting because they just need a link. And people that are external that want to get into a meeting just need the link that is sent to them. That's different and distinct from being a guest in a team. This is more like inviting someone to a Zoom meeting, okay? And when they get into this, they show up as participants. It looks pretty normal. This is the standard way that functions. What else? I think I've covered most of this, but let's see, the share option. Yeah, the white, you get to this, you can see browse files of your OneDrive. So you can share, SharePoint or PowerPoint documents or things from this. Let's see, what else did I want to cover in here? And I think I talked about it all. But as I said, you can invite or have a link to them. Now, one thing you might be asking is, what if how do people join meetings that are sent to them? The way, let's see. Normally, a meeting has just a link to it because Teams doesn't automatically add phone numbers to your call to call into the meeting. So someone would have to have, a Chrome browser or Chrome or Edge or Teams installed on their computer. But if they're on the road and only have a cellular connection or they don't want to install the app, Teams doesn't by default provide the invitation with a link. And I'm going to show you what this looks like here. But there is a solution to this problem in Meeting. And if you give me a second, I'm going to open this up. Oh, it's not. It's not showing it. Well, anyways, then I won't. I can't show this. So one thing to note is that a meeting that you create, you can have a phone number for other people to call into your meetings. And that requires that you add something, an audio conferencing license to your users. So when you add an audio conferencing license to that user, it's just sort of automatic. It's magic. You sign the license, and then within the next day, that person will get the license, the conferencing turned on, and all of their meetings will now have a phone number in addition to that. So I really like that functionality, and I suggest that if you're really serious into using Teams and maybe not paying for a third-party another product for meetings, add the phone number option, and it's $1.60 per user per month. So it's pretty inexpensive as things go. And you can, final comments. We had a lot of people with Teams account or Zoom accounts, and we really consolidated to like just a couple Zoom accounts for some specific purposes, and then gave everyone phone audio conferencing licenses. And that way, everybody had the same functionality, and it's generally worked out well. There was some trepidation, honestly, like I think at first about what it meant to not have Zoom, because everyone's sort of used to Zoom, but it's generally worked out. At least they haven't complained to me. So I'm going to take a moment and wait for questions.
One question came in, Graham.
On any applications.
How will this event be shared? Some people are wondering if they'll be able to catch up with it after. Will we be able to email this out, or will this be posted on our website?
Yes, we'll probably post this on our website, and then we'll send out to send the link to the recording to guests and people who signed up, because I know some people were not able to attend.
Okay. And I had one other question come in about how small nonprofits may use Teams. I think they're looking for an example of how it works in practice. Would I be able to share my screen for about a minute and show something?
Let's see. I think, yeah, if you'd like to, sure.
Sure. So good question. Leo, thank you for chiming in. You've had some great questions today. I'm going to show you just a moment of how my Teams works in practice. We had a great setup of setting up a new Teams, but I want to show you how a little bit of this is working. I'm going to keep this short so I don't share my lovely conversations with you. But this is how this works. So here is my Teams for 501 Commons. So I have a chat going with Graham.
No, we're not seeing.
Let's see. Can you see now? Nod if you can see things, Leo. Great, thank you. So here is a Teams that I have with 501 Commons. As you can see, we have ongoing chats with anyone in our organization. Here's chats with other people in the organization. These chats can be groups or individuals, and new people from outside can also be invited to these chats. So what I like about this is we have a lot of ongoing conversations that stay very well organized. I've had certain people I've worked with that sent 1,000 emails, and they always have really, really good things to say, but it was a lot of emails. And if they're organized in a function like this, we know where to expect them. The conversation stays together, and it can be organized in a way about certain topics. So these are the teams that Graham was mentioning about certain topics. And it's nice that you can invite anyone in your organization to those, and those conversations stay together. And then a calendar in practice is neat. Here we go. This is a way that works a lot like Outlook calendaring. But overall, I've liked that there is a way for it to use video functioning, just very similar to Zoom, and keep your conversations and files together in a really neat, accessible way. And it's easy to pull people from the outside into your conversations. So did that help answer the question, Leo? And we do appreciate that Leo and Joanne put on video. It's nice to see a couple faces out there. So we have, do we have a couple other questions today? We have just a few more minutes. If not, we'll share a bit more about if you would like any support with these types of things.
Well, I got a couple more slides.
Fantastic. Thank you, Graham.
Okay, and please chime in with your questions. Let's see. So a couple other things about Teams and some guidance. It's not great, like there's no just basic shared calendars. If you want calendaring in there, the reason being is that the calendar that you see in Teams is really a calendar for meetings, for Teams meetings. It isn't like an events calendar for the organization, like you might have, or for your, or program calendar. You might have an Outlook. It's not going to really replace that. And it's a little tricky, honestly, with things like, I've had clients who want a board team, and then they're like, well, how do I do a board calendar? There's not a great solution currently. You can use lists, and lists has that calendar view of items. And that's probably the best solution so far, is use a list with a calendar view for those items. My slide changed. I discourage the use of private channels Private channels are a bit of a hack and they get a little confusing. The idea of a private channel is that you can have a subsection of a team that is for just a subset of users. I honestly would just create a separate team rather than using the private channel. That's because it just gets a little messy from an administrative standpoint. I already talked a little about using teams for shared for files. I think it depends on your organization and how you want to deal with it. But there are downsides to using sort of teams or like the SharePoint site that's associated with a team for storing files. Also, like etiquette and what to do when things go wrong. This is, an online culture. Like you need to have understand, folks need to be trained to be courteous and respectful, understand that conversations in chat lack verbal and nonverbal cues. I've seen many situations where chat in Teams becomes a conflict because of misinterpretations, jokes that frankly don't come across as jokes on Teams. So it's really important to have conversations about culture and expectations about conversations in Teams and any, frankly, chat platform, because this can go really sideways really fast, especially in like multicultural organizations that can be particularly dangerous, honestly. And we want these platforms to facilitate good teamwork, not be an avenue for destruction. When things go wrong, Teams messages are stored in the system within a compliance framework. So within the Office 365 compliance tools. I know of a case where an employee was accused of harassing another person on Teams or things were sent. And it's possible that for an individual to delete messages that they've sent. But the truth of the matter is just like everything deleted, nothing goes away. And so we were asked to help restore those messages or get access to those deleted messages so that as part of an investigation and other actions. And so you can use Office 365's compliance tools to query and export all messages, including deleted messages from Teams. Now, deleted messages will go away eventually, unless you have enabled certain compliance policies like preservation policies. But within, I think, 60 or 90 days at least, you can get even access to deleted stuff. So an administrator can get access to those things using compliance tools, which run queries without having to actually log in as that user, just to be clear. It serves that specific purpose. So, this is all the more reason to use a tool like Teams, frankly, because it provides all of those sort of important like administrative tools that you don't want to ever have to use, but when you need them, you really need them. And if you're using, chat tools or third-party products you don't have control over, you then have, especially administrators and managers, do not have the tools to be able to equitably and fairly address problems. And the question was asked, do guests need Teams? So no, they don't. And in fact, even if, as I said, they have a web browser access. So I often encourage folks to, like, you invite people to meetings, let them know they don't need to install Teams. They can just join through the web. So that's, one option.
And Graham, is that for joining a video meeting, or does that include being able to type and add content in an actual Teams chat?
All of the above. So everything can be done through a web browser. But, especially guests joining meetings will use probably the web often to join a meeting. So whereas like Zoom users need to download, install, and run Zoom to access a meeting, Teams has a full web support for the clients.
So as long as you have an account, you could bring someone, invite a board member with a Gmail account to participate in your meetings and your chat.
Yeah. We talked about guests, phone system. So my Teams, and we're actually running late here. Teams can be your phone system. I like it because it actually just enables a dial pad right within Teams. It can also enable the dial pad within Teams on your cell phone, so that if you want to switch and deploy a mobile telephone system, it's a few clicks away, honestly. And there's no installing other applications. If everybody already has Teams, Teams will just start being a phone. And when you want to say, you can dial people into the meetings by just dialing their number. And it doesn't show up because I don't have it turned on mine, but it really just like starts showing a dial pad. And so you can you start being able to treat within Teams external people the same way that have just phone numbers, the same way you would treat an external person that has an email address. And you can just start dialing it. And then I talked a little bit about the conference numbers and everything. The licensing with Teams, everything with Teams is included in 365 Nonprofit Enterprise or small business licensing. I mentioned the audio conferencing, it's $1.60 per user per month. And then for the phone system, the best deal is this Microsoft Business Voice, which is $14 per user per month. And that business voice, it includes the phone system, a US calling plan, and it also is inclusive of audio conferencing. So it includes that $1.60. So if you are on small business premium licenses that are like $5 per user per month, and then $14 for the business voice, you have a fully functional package of 365 for 19, which is a pretty good deal, especially with as voice systems and voice over IP goes. And it's very easy to deploy and like install it, because they said you turn it on, you assign phone numbers to people, and all of a sudden their Teams becomes their phone. Yeah, I do encourage folks to have Teams on your phone if you go on vacation. You know what I do? I delete Teams on my phone. I just delete the application because I don't want anyone chatting with me while I'm gone. So, when they say, oh, I don't want this app on my phone, well, there are ways to deal with that. Any last questions?
We have one other question about a setting in meetings. Oh, okay. Actually, I'm gonna answer that one. So it looks like we've answered most of the questions that have come in. If you would like to learn more, a couple specific questions, or if you do need assistance in setting up Microsoft Teams or the 365 suite for your nonprofit, we can help with that. That is a service that we do offer at 501 Commons. One neat thing about Microsoft is they give you up to 10 free licenses. So if you're a 501c3 nonprofit, Teams and everything in the Microsoft 365 suite is included. There is a bit of setup and some administrative functions that do need to be adjusted. So it does take some time to set up, but once you have that set up, you may have the option to get rid of storage in Dropbox, in Google Drive, get rid of Zoom, and there's a lot of cost savings that can happen once you have these programs tied together. If you have any other questions or are interested in any sort of support, if it's a quick question for Graham and you just want to fix something that's broken, we do offer support. It's $25 for 15 minutes, and he's happy to hop in. He's a wizard and can fix and update anything you could think of, probably. And if you're interested in a larger project like setting up Microsoft 365, cloud migration, setting up cloud computing, and any support with your IT systems or database systems, feel free to reach out, and I'll put our email in there. You could also go to 501commons.org. Is there anything else that you'd like to say in closing, Graham?
No, I mean, there's always more to say, but I think I've covered the most.
All right, then I just have one question for the audience. Where are you from? It'd be fun to put it in the chat. So send where you're typing in today in the chat. We'll see where you are across the world. 501 Commons, many of us are based in Seattle, and we do have staff that are a few other places, and we do offer service across the US and a few other countries, but we'd love to hear where you're chiming in from today. And I'm just going to read a couple off and then we'll wrap up for today. Okay, let's see. We have a Choices Education Group in Seattle. All right. We have Tyler in Rhode Island. That's fun. It's neat to see where people come from. A few others. Okay, well, I'm in Seattle. Graham's in Seattle. Thank you so much for tuning in today. It was a pleasure to have you. This is